إن الحمد لله نحمده تعالى ونشكره ونستعين به ونسترشده ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا وقائدنا ومرشدنا وحجتنا وشفيعنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فإن أصدق الحديث كلام الله، وخير الهدي هدي محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم، وشر الأمور محدثاتها، وكل محدثة بدعة، وكل بدعة ضلالة، وكل ضلالة في النار. عباد الله، أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله وطاعته، وأحثكم على التمسك بهدي قرآنه وسنة نبيه. فقد قال الله جل من قائل: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء، واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم، ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. صدق الله العظيم. My dear children, sisters and brothers, dear family, I was looking for an appropriate nasiha, an appropriate advice to be the subject matter of my khutbah before heading off to Hajj at the end of next week. And all of a sudden, a very large number of topics started to swarm in my mind. So many things are happening. And I say it without exaggeration, I could have blindly picked up a topic to be a nasiha, but I couldn't do that. And finally, two topics kept alternating in my consciousness, one after the other, so I decided to speak about both of them and find the connecting thread that ties them together. And both of them, my son Hassan mentioned them in his announcements. The first one, and by the way, both of them have images in my consciousness, and I'm sure in your consciousness as well, that it will be very hard to erase. They will never go away. The first one is what happened after Jumu'ah Salat last Friday. All of us ran to see what happened. And I was there on the spot. But I don't want to describe what happened. What I want to select from that is what really engraved lessons in my consciousness, in my conscience, in my nafs, in myself, and taught me lessons, and I say it in plural, lessons. I was sitting there And I was so concerned about what happened, and I all of a sudden said, "Where's the father of this child?" And I heard a soft voice next to me from a man who was holding that young boy, who said, "I am his father." He was calm, he was focused, and he kept saying something that I'm sure very few of us could repeat. After I asked, "Who is the father?" and he said, "I'm the father," his tongue started to move with dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he kept repeating, "Lillahi ma a'ta, wa lillahi ma akhadh, wa kullu shay'in 'indahu bimiqdar. Lillahi ma a'ta, wa lillahi ma akhadh, wa kullu shay'in 'indahu bimiqdar." And then he continued with other dhikr and tasbih. And I got goosebumps. I started to feel small. I said to myself, if this happened with me, my tongue will be paralyzed. My tongue will not move. But he showed me and others that Iman, as Al-Hasan al-Basri once said, is ما وقر في القلب وصدقه العمل. As he moved to the hospital and a throng of us went there, he sat in one corner and he kept doing his dhikr. That's all he did. That's all he did. And he asked us to make dua for his son. And dua was made, I tell you, in every corner of the world. As for one, all the people I spoke with all over the world about different topics, I told them about Ahmed. And I asked them to make dua. And they made dua. And that dua, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed us, and this is the other lesson that I learned. Wallahi ya ikhwa wa ya akhawat, dua works. When it comes from your heart, dua works. Doctors were extremely skeptical. But now Ahmed is off life support. Ahmed is talking. Ahmed is communicating with his parents. And inshallah, with continued dua, Ahmed will be walking again. Please, don't stop making dua for Ahmed and for his father Hussam, because they made an example to all of us. I will never forget. The second image is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willed. It was His will. وَكُلُّ شَيْءٍ عِنْدَهُ بِمِقْدَارٍ. Everything with Allah is done according to certain measures that we may not understand. For a few months, we've been hearing about Syrian refugees drowning in the sea. For a few months, we were hearing about Libyans drowning in the Mediterranean. And for one, I tell you, I kept bringing back what happened to me personally with my family. 39 years ago, I was one of those boat people. And I left my country where I was born, Lebanon. And it was a very stormy night where our boat almost capsized and we were almost drowned, but it was the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we would arrive at the shores of this beautiful country. And now we talk about it as history. And many people did drown. But you know what? For a few months, we started to become numb. We didn't do anything. We didn't say anything. We just exchanged news with each other. That's all we did. And we know what is happening to the Syrian people. We know what is happening, and it's very difficult to imagine putting ourselves in that situation where people are dying in scores every day, where now more than half of the Syrian population is either martyred or displaced or somewhere seeking refuge. And we are looking until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided to shake us and shake our consciousness and our morality. So He sent a soul that is now a bird in Jannah. He sent a soul and made us look at that soul lying head down on a Turkish shoreline. All of a sudden, everybody now is talking about the catastrophe and the disaster that is more than 5 years old, which may be the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to say, what are you doing? Now Aylan Kurdi, 2 years old, was with his family trying to search for a life that has become something to be taken for granted for our children and our families. We continue to talk about preparation to go back to school, and where are you going to take your children on this long weekend for their holidays? Where did you go for vacations? We continue to do that. And imagine putting yourself as the father of Aylan describe what happened in the last moments. He said, I was holding on to my family on this capsized boat. And all of a sudden, one of my children slipped, and I couldn't go to save him because I was holding to my other children and to my wife. But the moment I looked to see my wife, I looked at her, she was gone too. So I held on to my child, but the waves were so strong that he slipped as well. And that's the infant that was seen on that Turkish border. And now we are talking about refugees all of a sudden. But I want to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that this dunya, this life that we breathe, its air, is a transitional form of life. It is a life, but it is not the end. So Aylan now has arrived safely at the gateway to the real life, which we are still dreaming about. We don't know how we are going to arrive at its gates. Therefore, we turn to the comfort of the Quran, to the comfort of the Quran, and we ask ourselves, what shall we do? What's our role? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Hashr spoke about those who are driven out and those whose responsibility is to welcome them. And look, He used the example of the Muhajirin of Mecca and the Ansar of Medina. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Hashr, by the way, every surah of the Quran may talk about different topics that for the passing eye and for the person who's reading those surahs at the surface may wonder, what's the connection between this topic and this topic and this topic and this topic in the same surah? What's going on? The time of this khutbah does not allow us to go into describing that there is a very tight connection But that segment in Surah Al-Hashr says after أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم للفقراء المهاجرين. Look at this. للفقراء المهاجرين الذين أخرجوا not خرجوا الذين أخرجوا they were forced out الذين أخرجوا من ديارهم وأموالهم يبتغون فضلا من الله ورضوانا وينصرون الله ورسوله أولئك هم الصادقون. Now this, and I will translate it, this talks about them, those who are challenging our consciousness, those who are in the eye of the test. Now what about us? والذين تبوأوا الدار والإيمان من قبلهم يحبون من هاجر إليهم. يحبون not يرضون بمن هاجر يحبون من هاجر إليهم ولا يجدون في صدورهم حاجة مما أوتوا ويؤثرون على أنفسهم ولو كان بهم خصاصة ومن يوق شح نفسه فأولئك هم المفلحون. صدق الله العظيم. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. There is a lesson for them and for us and for the observers, for Muslims, non-Muslims. And by the way, if time permits, I'm going to draw a very quick comparison between the so-called un-Islamic, but I can't say un-Islamic in a derogatory fashion. I would say just to describe those who were not Muslim, how they reacted, and those who were Muslim, how they reacted. La ilaha illallah. But the two ayat make an encyclopedia of imaniyat. And this is where the tying line between what happened to Ahmed Shweikh and what happened to Aylan Kurdi. This is the timeline, and that is iman. Faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. First of all, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, as for the poor people who were seeking another life somewhere else, who left their homes. And I will mention after I talk about the two ayat from Surah Al-Hashr, towards the end of Surah Al Imran, another theme similar to this is mentioned. I will mention that inshallah. But here it says, as for the poor people who were seeking refuge somewhere else, they were driven despite their unwillingness to do that. They left everything they owned, wealth and homes and everything. They had absolutely nothing. Why? They were seeking a favor from Allah. And they wanted Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be happy with them. You know, the fadl that is mentioned in this ayah, يَبْتَغُونَ فَضْلًا مِنَ اللَّهِ, you know, is the fadl of Allah. ذَلِكَ الْفَضْلُ مِنَ اللَّهِ. Everything we are enjoying is a fadl from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The peace we are enjoying here is a fadl from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they were looking for peace. They were looking for security. They were looking for a shelter over their head. They deserve all of that. They were looking for that. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do not doubt their intentions. أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الصَّادِقُونَ. These people are truthful. And look at the ending of the ayah. أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الصَّادِقُونَ. Don't start saying, but it is their mistake and they shouldn't have. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala moves us on the face of this earth by causes that are only known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, those people that we look at now as refugees, one day in the country of their settlement, they may be the reason for a great cultural phenomenon that would not have materialized had Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not moved them out of their birthplace. أَلَمْ تَكُنْ أَرْضُ اللَّهِ وَاسِعَةً فَتُهَاجِرُوا فِيهَا. This earth belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now all of those geographical and political boundaries are man-made. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created an earth that is open to all of us. But it is something that when people started to really surround themselves by racial, political, geographic boundaries, things started to change. And now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Hashr, the second ayah, is talking about us. He's saying, as for those who went before the refugees and settled in Ad-Dar and Al-Iman. By the way, Ad-Dar and Al-Iman are two names of Medina. These are names of Al-Madinah Al-Munawwara. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, as for those muhajirin who left Mecca before the other muhajirin and settled in Ad-Dar and Al-Iman, and as for the Ansar, the supporters, may I ask you to move to this side because there are people standing on the walls. Please move before you see Brother Hussein Fayyad. So please move so that everybody will have a place to sit, inshallah. Please, there's lots of space. So as for those who moved to Medina before, and brothers, may I now take the word Ad-Dar and Al-Iman and replace it. As for us who moved to Canada and we forgot when, because it's been now 30, 40, 50 years, are we going now to say, well, how much money do they need so that we can contribute? They do not need our money, even though money will help, but they need our love. You know what's love? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on purpose in this ayah said, يُحِبُّونَ مَنْ هَاجَرَ إِلَيْهِمْ. They really love to be joined by those refugees, to be joined so that they will do their share in welcoming them, in doing what they can do for them, so that they will comfort them. And look at this, they never feel, now if we share part of our wealth, if we share part of our home, as that lady from Iceland, she was all over the internet saying, I have a room that no one in my family uses. I am going to reach out and say, I will welcome a Syrian refugee family who can use this room in Iceland. She's not a Muslim, she doesn't pray 5 times a day, but that's her feeling. Angela Merkel, and I mentioned it 3 times, because I don't want to mention names of others on the other side of the wall. She said, no barbed wires, open the borders, bring them, we will take 800,000. Unlike him who said, if I get elected, I will admit 10,000 people into Canada, if I get elected. I'm not going to talk about those who closed their borders next to Syria, and they said, we are not going to take any more. They are causing us lots of discomfort, and they are. At the time when there is such a disaster, all of humanity shares in. It is not only the Syrians, but people have become numb. Look what happened. Many years back it was the Lebanese. Many years back it were the Palestinians. Many years back it were the Pakistanis. Many years back it was Somalia. And now, if we look at the world, we see that everybody is suffering. Everybody is suffering. This is a human cause, not only a Syrian cause. That is why يُحِبُّونَ مَنْ هَاجَرَ إِلَيْهِمْ وَلَا يَجِدُونَ فِي صُدُورِهِمْ حَاجَةً مِمَّا أُوتُوا You know, what I earned, what I got, I will give it to those in need. وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. They would rather give it to those in need, even they may use it for their own families. No, I'm going to help someone else. This is Quran. This is Iman. This is Islam. This is Ihsan. This is birr. This is all of the goodness that we amass as Muslims. Now, are we going to translate our Iman into action like our brother Hussam Shweikh, who taught a lesson last Jumu'ah? Are we going to, before I say anything else, I'm going to fill in the blanks. I was so proud of my son Hassan this morning. And he said, I don't want to spoil it for Ammu Munir. And I do appreciate that, even though he was working very hard with other people in the community. Please, we've been so used to criticizing every time this community doesn't rise to the level that we expect it to rise. Let us not forget we have limited resources, but we do have good leadership. We do have people who are sincere, enough doubting each other, enough saying that we are no good. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not like people who are negative. Our community works, and if sometimes we do not deliver at the standard that we expect, let us give them, that is our leadership, the support they need. Maybe next time they will. So my son Hassan told me that Masjid Oxford, the Muslim Association of Canada, of London, and the Islamic Center got together and they met and they said, the same as other churches and synagogues are sponsoring Syrian families, we should be at the forefront. And they already started the process, and guess what? The mayor of London got on board, and many of the councillors and many of the candidates running in the federal election and many of the MPPs, and they said, how can we help? Now we are taking the leadership, and we are going to sponsor as many families as we want, because it's a communal effort. So please talk to Hassan, because now it is together. It's not only the Islamic Center, it's the entire Muslim community. The entire Muslim community. So talk to him and the others on the board, and let us quickly, it's not a matter of regular fundraising. This is not a normal fundraising. This is a conscience-raising effort. It's a moral-raising effort. It's something that we cannot sit back and say, oh, this church sponsored that many families and that synagogue did. Why not our community? Let us show that when we raise in the hundreds of thousands to make our places of worship big, and we need to do that, let us say that our community is not made of brick and mortar. Our community is made of people. And that is why we need to bring those people. يُحِبُّونَ مَنْ هَاجَرَ إِلَيْهِمْ فَاسْتَجَابَ لَهُمْ رَبُّهُمْ أَنِّي لَا أُضِيعُ عَمَلَ عَامِلٍ مِّنكُمْ مِنْ ذَكَرٍ أَوْ أُنْثَى بَعْضُكُمْ مِنْ بَعْضٍ فَالَّذِينَ هَاجَرُوا وَأُخْرِجُوا مِنْ دِيَارِهِمْ وَأُوذُوا فِي سَبِيلِي وقاتلوا وقتلوا لأكفرن عنهم سيئاتهم ولأدخلنهم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار ثوابا من عند الله والله عنده حسن الثواب. Look at this. All of those people driven away from their homes, Allah is telling them at the end of Surah Al-Imran that you will get your recompensation for what you did, and leave it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ثوابا من عند الله. It comes from Allah. وَاللَّهُ عِنْدَهُ حُسْنٌ. He has the best of rewards. So for them, those who got martyred, وَقَاتَلُوا وَقُتِلُوا. Look at this, look at this. You know, قَاتَلُوا وَقُتِلُوا. When you are fighting waves in the Mediterranean, or the Aegean Sea, or the Black Sea, you are fighting. Your enemy here is that wave that may take your life. وَقَاتَلُوا وَقُتِلُوا. This is martyrdom. You know that the one who dies drowning is a shaheed, is a shaheed. وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتًا بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ يُرْزَقُونَ. Ahmed is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, enjoying a life of plentifulness. So let us not just feel sad and sit back. This is the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and inshallah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make those people shuhada. But as for the others, we need as a community to stand up with Hassan and Ali and say, we are with you, and Samir, and we say, behind you we are walking, and we will inshallah do what is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله العظيم لي ولكم فيا فوز المستغفرين. Make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He will accept our dua. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. الحمد لله وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, let us not forget, وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. Now it is in Syria, tomorrow we don't know where it is. Allah says, days alternate, you know, their exam, their test is today. We don't know when our test will be. And for some, we got a test, but we don't know. We may get another test. So humanity says that we should work together. We should work together as a community. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala endowed us with something now, rather than if you were planning to invest your money somewhere else, I will tell you about a good investment that is way high on the divine market. I changed the word stock market and I'm calling it divine market. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is putting for us to buy those shares in the market of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by giving fi sabilillah. By giving fi sabilillah and saying, Ya Allah, this is what we can do. So let us now surprise everybody by sponsoring so many families. They are saying it's $20,000 per family. I don't know what the rule is. I'm looking at Hassan, but you know, we don't know, but he knows all the rules. Please, I would like Hassan and, by the way, I failed to mention that it is not Hassan and Ali and Samir who are really coordinating this. It is their wives and all the women. You know, and I'm not trying to differentiate here, but I would like to say, for those who think that, you know, the females, the women, the girls, the sisters are the ones who give us the delicious fataya and things, and nothing wrong with that either, because, you know, this is how communities work, but they are good planners and they are working now, and inshallah we will work together. So please, please, give in the tens of thousands, give in the dollar, give in the toonie, give, but let us sponsor as many refugees and send a strong message to the world that there is a city on the map called London, Ontario. إن شاء الله. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم، وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وخطايانا وإسرافنا في أمرنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه، وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم علمنا من ديننا ما جهلنا وذكرنا منه ما نسينا، وكن معنا ولا تكن علينا. عباد الله، إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اذكروا الله العظيم يذكركم وادعوه يستجب لكم، ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون. وأقم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله.